Funny to see someone say it's delayed right when I'm joining. Again, I usually give it a few minutes after it's supposed to go live to make sure people have that extra time to join. Let me know when you guys can hear me, especially in the Moore's Laws Dead Discord. So I typically trust the Discord people more that the audio is all good before I really get into it. Usually there's like a 10-second delay. So let's see. I'm sure the typing will all happen right now. All right. Everyone says they can hear me fine, which is good. There has been some really interesting YouTube issues over the past month in videos. Actually, last night's video I had to upload 3 times, but I at least knew to check for it before I made it go live. It had that issue where it was locked to 360p. And even when it worked, I was told by a couple people it just didn't work on iOS for about an hour, which is hilarious to me. I don't know what's going on over there at Intel. But anyways, here we are. Welcome. This is technically the end of May loose ends. This is one of the ones that's coming out a bit later than expected. And for those who don't know, yep, this is a live Q&A. You put in a tipped question. I'm likely to see it. I'll get to it as quickly as possible. In the meantime, I have a few pages of notes always prepared ahead of time from the Moore's Laws Dead patrons who are able to submit reader mails for free at the proper tiers. And then once I get through that, if there's no like tipped questions, then I start going through just random chats that I see or chat questions that I see from you guys based on whatever I feel like answering. And then, of course, questions submitted in the after video chat channel in the Moore's Laws Dead Discord, which again, you get access to if you support us. So before I get into that as well, let me just say again, like I have been the past few loose ends, this live stream is sponsored by Micro Center. Prices are going down, but I've got to be honest. Whenever I look around at whichever product I'm going to get or thinking of getting, the price is almost always cheaper at Micro Center, especially when it comes to CPUs, where you get like $50 off of a motherboard or something. Or sometimes it's like it depends on the day, but it's like $20 to $50 off a motherboard if you buy it with a CPU. And there's a link in the description. You can get a free 256 gigabyte SSD if you go there and get some stuff. And that's really it. If you're a new customer, you just get a free SSD for your build if you use the link in the description. So there's that. They're the new PC builder. I'll bring them up again. Micro Center has been a fantastic sponsor for this channel, and I can't recommend them enough. I really don't know what else to say. The best deals I've ever gotten on computer parts is from Micro Center. They have a fantastic selection. And again, you can just get a free SSD if you use the link in the description. And clicking on that link really does help the channel, whether you need one or not, whether you're going to get it soon or not. Please click on it, show support. All right. Let us get into the questions. I don't see any real tipped ones. So I'm going to start going through the talking points that I prepared for today. And I think, let me see where we at in the timestamp. 3:23. Let's start with Raptor Lake because it's funny, this is something anyone who's followed this channel would have easily noticed, been paying attention to a lot over the past month. And that's what the heck is going on with Intel's execution, because there's something wrong here. Sapphire Rapids is coming out super late. Emerald Rapids continues to get pushed back. If I'll see if I can remember to put a link in the description, but I mentioned it in my last video. Like, there are roadmaps that have shown that Granite Rapids was supposed to come out this year, and Emerald Rapids was then supposed to come out this year, and then it was supposed to come out early next year. And that everything just keeps getting pushed back. Alchemist is delayed, and after putting that video out, I got even more feedback. And there's a reason I was pretty bearish on the release date of Raptor Lake. Now, people will see that and go, what? So they're going to paper launch in September and launch in October. Isn't that not weird? But I still don't have a firm date for when Raptor Lake is launching in October. And now I'm hearing it doesn't sound like an early October launch. It sounds like Raptor Lake, and there is no firm date yet, seems to be launching mid to late October as the target. Right. And again, it was supposed to just firmly come out in September. Then it was going to be early October. And already I'm being told that they're telling their partners to prepare for late October. And that's just for the KSKUs and then maybe some of the highest end laptops. But again, when I look at all these other delays, I go, and then I look at the fact that supposedly overwhelming majority of the volume of Raptor Lake isn't hitting until quarter 1. I go, I don't know. I'm just concerned that even if they pretend it launches first, much like they did with Alchemist in quarter 1, did Alchemist really launch quarter 1? I'm getting more and more concerned that's what's going to happen with Raptor Lake. And AMD's got a lot of Zen 4 products coming, guys. It is not just normal Zen 4. They're going to try to bring V-Cache models as quickly as possible. We know they're using 4 nanometer for some products. They just confirmed that. I don't know. Raptor Lake is competitive in performance with Zen 4, but that's about it. And it's not like it's going to be a clean sweep. So the longer they take to bring that out, the more it's going to start feeling like, and I'm not saying it's like this, but the more it's going to feel like Rocket Lake, where it's like, if Rocket Lake were to come out, or like Comet Lake were to come out next to Zen 2, you'd go, "Oh, wow." But the longer it gets pushed back, Rocket Lake was just a less efficient Zen 3, with obviously the caveat that Raptor Lake actually has enough cores. But I think that's what you got to think about, right? Most people don't buy the highest end chip. Most people aren't buying like a $700 or more i9 or 5950X. Most people buy that $400 and lower range. And if Raptor Lake would have been out next to Zen, like Zen 2's release or Zen 3's initial release, it would have been cool. But instead, it was like, well, there's a less efficient Zen 3 a year later. And that's, again, that's an extreme comparison. That's not what I'm saying about Raptor Lake. It is coming out close about the same time as Zen 4. But the more some of it gets pushed back, the more I go, yeah, the longer it takes to come to laptop, Phoenix will be out. I don't know. It's just a concern. And all I'm saying again is, from what I hear, it sounds like Raptor Lake is slipping already to late October. So do with that information what you will. It just, again, I just don't know why they can't bring it out when they told their partners they were going to bring it out months ago. All right, so that's kind of the Raptor Lake release update. I guess, let me see, is there any tipped questions? Someone gave a tip. Mercia, I do not know how to read your name, but thank you for the tip. Let me move on here to, I guess instead of just getting into Zen 4, I'm sure I'll just roll into it through these reader mails. So let me start reading some of the patron questions, which again, remember, you can submit for free if you support us there. All right, let me put a timestamp at 7:33. Deep Glugs writes in and he says, if I understand correctly, the dismal outlook for Intel is because they need to get Raptor Lake out before Zen 4, and they need to get Meteor Lake, and he put need in all caps. They need to get Meteor Lake Mobile out before Zen 4 Mobile. They likely won't. No, they're not. They're not getting Meteor Lake out by the time Zen 4 Mobile Phoenix is out. And I don't know that I'd say they need to get Raptor Lake out before Zen 4, but the farther it gets delayed, the more it's like, there's a lot of momentum Intel could have had. I feel like that they're just not going to have if they don't do that. But he says, how much more dismal would our outlook for Intel be if Zen 4 had come out when originally expected, which is to say around Alder Lake's release? I think any Zen 4 release in 2021 would have always probably been a paper launch, at the very end of the year, kind of like 7970 did at the end of 2011, where it's like it technically launched that year, but did it really? So I still think there's no doubt about it. Alder Lake was going to launch before Zen 4. But if Zen 4 would have dropped 3 months or so after Alder Lake, if we would have had early benchmarks of Zen 4 finished models benchmarked when Alder Lake was dropping, if AMD would have, chosen to leak or done a paper launch around Alder Lake's launch, yeah, I think it wouldn't feel that special, right? It would have kind of, I'm trying to think of an example, it would have kind of been like Comet Lake, right? Comet Lake launched before Zen 3, right? If I remember correctly. Already I'm like starting to forget some things. I'm like 99% sure, but I just want to make sure I don't get it wrong. Release date. It released April 2020, right? I think that's what would have happened, Deep Glugs, if Zen 4 would have launched when they were initially targeting, which is to say end of 2021, early 2022. It would have been, Alder Lake would have felt like Comet Lake. It's like, okay, Comet Lake increases core counts. It's better. Security problems fixed. It's great. But everyone knew that Zen 3 was going to bring like another 20, 30% increase without upping power consumption. And no one was excited. That's how I feel like people would have felt about Alder Lake. And what's interesting is there was still a little bit of that with some people with Zen 3D, but I think we all knew Zen 3D was unlikely to be as much of a lineup as like Zen 4 is going to be. So that's what I think would have happened. You know, people would have looked at Alder Lake and went, "That's cool, but I'm waiting for Zen 4," which in some ways people seemingly already have done that. All right, let me see, make sure I don't miss any tipped questions. All right, Spam to Neo writes in, during their past few live streams, AMD has said something to the effect of AM4 is a great platform that will continue for many years to come, and AM4 and AM5 platforms will coexist. Now, his question is, this is pure speculation, but what are your thoughts on what that could mean? Would that mean they are stuck with DDR4 unless they do a major change? And at what point, why not just make a new socket? I think it's pretty simple, right? There's no reason to not keep producing some AM4 processors and motherboards as long as it's economic to do so. And since launch, AM4, I mean, like B550, X570 motherboards have become cheaper to produce. Again, this is something I pointed out with my X670 pricing leak. I know people are like a little mad. There will be some products that cost more than what you can get now, but you guys got to go back and look at B550's initial pricing. It was like 150 minimum, and there were $300 B550 motherboards. There are some excuses I've seen people make for why that made sense, but I'm sorry, it was expensive, more expensive than overall B650 is going to be. So at this point, though, we're not at B550's launch anymore. B550 gets to down to $100. You know, X570s are typically below 200, or though still more expensive than I think some AMD fanboys admit. But, you know, so that's cheaper. So what if someone has DDR4? You have the 5800X3D, which is selling fantastically. That's AMD's DDR4 solution. When Intel goes, we've got DDR4 support with Raptor Lake, AMD goes, yep, so do we with the 5800X3D. And guess what? Our motherboards are cheaper and you don't even need fast DDR4. The V cache makes it so that it performs fine. You know, it'd be cool if they launched a 16 core Zen 3D. I still wish they would, because I would totally upgrade to that actually in my system. But that's their solution. I wouldn't read too much into it. I think I've seen weird speculation out there like, "Oh, are they going to port Zen 4 to it?" No. Are they going to do like no, no, it's as simple as it sounds. AM4 motherboards have become cheaper to produce. They've been making them for a very long time. The margins on Zen 3 are absurd, probably even at half MSRP. I mean, guys, it's like there's a similar amount of silicon in a 5950X to what's in the 6600 XT, and they're selling the 5950X for like 50% more to twice as much as a 6600 XT. They don't have a cooler on it. It's cheaper to ship. That should tell you what margins there are in Zen 3. AMD can afford to just spit out like 5700Xs for 200 and 5800 X3Ds for whatever people will pay for them. Certainly for they could probably afford to sell them for like 350, 300 if they wanted to, but they can't even keep it in stock in the North America. So that's the solution. They can keep making these cheaper, and that's their solution to the people that go, "Oh, I want a DDR4 system." They're like, "Well, then get a 5800 X3D. It's cheaper anyways." But I wouldn't read into it as like some weird thing's going to be launched on it just yet, because I haven't heard anything about that. I kind of think it's unnecessary. All right. Let me move on to another question here from Amiable Chief. With Intel throwing out a new chipset every 2 gens for reasons, do you think board partners are happier with them than with AMD? AMD has and likely will continue to stick to a chipset for about twice the amount of time as Intel typically. At the same time, there's clearly more excitement around AMD products. So is there potentially some degree of resentment among board partners at missing out on churning out new motherboards and cashing in on the excitement? Um, I put it this way. Right now, AMD's partners are just happy they're launching a bunch of new products. And in fact, I bet they're very happy with AMD for making X670E, X670, B650E, and B650. They have all types of different options they can mix and match to both get to the exact products they want to sell to customers, not requiring PCIe 5.0 and everything, but also just different ways of kind of milking different segments for exactly what people want, which you can call it milking, or you can say Yeah, or there's no reason to put this feature in there if people aren't going to pay for it. So I'd say right now, AMD's partners are very, very excited. And the fact of the matter is, and I actually have been investigating this and touched on this in last night's video. Z790, I don't have that much info on it, honestly, which is odd, right? If Intel is going to pretend Raptor Lake launches before Zen 4, why is AMD showing off physical AM5 motherboards, whereas we just got confirmation Z790 exists? So right now, I think board makers are just excited that AMD is going to launch when they say they're going to launch with a ton of different options to sell. Long term, are they going to push AMD to maybe not make the socket last as long? Maybe. If you actually go back and look at some old presentations, AMD talked a lot about how much effort it was to even put Zen 3 on AM4. Like they had to do a lot of, design work with the tracing on the package so that it lined up with the pins in AM4 that they said would have been cheaper if they just made a new socket. And so I do wonder, right? Because, we, of course, Zen 4 is on AM5. And I think we can assume, of course, Zen 5's an AM5. So we got Zen 4, Zen 5. And I wouldn't be surprised if actually in between those, there's like a Zen 4 V cache, maybe 4 nanometer refresh. So that's 3 generations right there, probably on AM5. Will they go to Zen 6 on there? Will there be a Zen 5 Plus? It's hard to say though, because AMD has been supporting AM4, Zen 1, Zen Plus, Zen 2, Zen 3, and even a Zen 3D chip and other little products all over the place with APUs. So I think you can make the argument that in terms of the amount of different things that are on AM4, it's been like 5 generations. I wouldn't be surprised if AMD just says, let's stop at 4 this time. I don't think or 3. Like, I don't think they're gonna limit it to just 2, but I think you're gonna get at least 3 years or so, and I just can't say if AMD's board partners will push them. I think AMD will probably be a little less scared to move on to, like, a new socket with Zen 6 if they think it will benefit them because they can justify it now. They have the money, they don't have to worry as much about people getting mad at them for not supporting it for a long time, but I don't know. So I guess again, Amiable Chief, to go back to your initial question, are they happier with Intel? I think board makers are happy to have new motherboards to sell, but at the same time, they're just happy AMD is going to make them able to sell more things right now. And I, I think there's a balance in what they'll push AMD to do. So that was a very long-winded answer to that one. But let me put down a timestamp for that. AM5 longevity. And I guess I'll just add that to this one as well. Like, I've seen so many people say we don't really know what AMD's longevity is on AM5, and it's like, I guess they haven't literally promised, but they've said it's gonna have a similar life. So when I see people questioning if it's worth getting AM5 over like hypothetically an equally priced and launching and performing Intel processor at the same time on LGA 1700/1800, I don't get that worry. Like, look, guys, it's gonna get several generations. Can I promise you it's 5, 4, or 3? No, but I'm like 99% sure it's more than 2, and I'm 100% sure if you buy Raptor, like, you're not getting shit after that. So I don't really get that. I've seen a lot of people in the comments ask that, like, how can we be sure? Well, you're 100% sure Raptor Lake's the end of that socket, and AMD said they're gonna support it a similar amount of time. I would say that's at least 3 generations on AM5. All right. I thought that was a good idea to drop that in as well. Okay, let me see. We got a couple of tipped questions, so let me get to those. Okay, Arik Calvara asks, will there be a 5900X 3D? I would heavily doubt it. I mean, even if AMD decided to launch more X3D products to AM4, which I wouldn't entirely rule out, I feel like they would limit it to just the 8-core models. Should I say 8-core CCD models? Like an 8-core and a 16-core. Everything else in the middle, you're kind of just trying to price performance threads. They're going to want to put out something else. I don't think they'd want to waste a V cache on a 6-core. CCD, when they know anyone who's willing to pay more than anyone who's willing to pay more than 450 for a V cache CPU that's above the 5800X 3D. Who's the person that isn't willing to pay the extra $100 or whatever for 16 cores over 12? introduce me to this person. So I don't think so. I think if they launch another thing, it's probably just a 16 core model. And I hope they do, but zero info on that. Wild speculation. Don't take this as me saying that's going to happen or something. And I find it pretty dang unlikely they launch any 6 core Vcache model. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if they don't with Zen 4 and they just limit it to the 8 core CCDs again. And in fact, if I were to AMD, that's what I would advise them to do, because in a segmentation perspective, that's really the person you're serving. Um, Giant Pie 12 writes in, any idea why Copite 7 Kimmy would say they are disappointed with RDNA 3 after mentioning the specs for the 4090? Um, the only reason anyone would be disappointed with RDNA 3 is if they let hype get the better of them. I'm sorry, guys. I've been saying for over a year RDNA 3 is going to double performance, at least. Well, roughly double is what I've always said, because and there's a lot of nitpicking that can go into what double even means. So I've always said roughly double is possible. I've been saying for at least half a year now. I'm sure of that. It's always was never going to be a small increase, but there were people saying honestly absurd performance increases gen over gen that to me always made absolutely no sense. And so if you're disappointed in RDNA 3, it's because you bought into that. And I would say the same of Zen 4. Like, I got the IPC a little off, but I got the boost clocks. Overall, it looks like the performance increase I said. I said the overall performance increase of Zen 4 was going to be what, 29 to 37%. AMD just confirmed 35%. Anyone disappointed by Zen 4 bought into like the 40% IPC increase hype, which I also didn't say. And that's why you've just got to, I don't know, be reasonable. I don't know where those performance claims come from. And I think Lovelace and RDNA 3 are going to be pretty close in performance no matter what. I know which one's going to be more efficient, and AMD just reconfirmed actually that. I've also thought that was weird. People quoting a 50% performance per watt increase with RDNA 3. I think they literally said that over a year ago, and I talked about it in videos since. This isn't new information. Frankly, the stuff AMD showed about RDNA 3 at their financial investor day, I don't know if any of it was new. Yeah, I mean, come on, guys. But anyways, um, Nori SS Tip says, for some doggy treats. He is such a great actor. She is a great actor in your sponsor spots. Thank you. I guess let me put a timestamp there as just kind of a heads up to the community. Um, so Reesie might be pretty sick. They just discovered something in her in a dental workup. So I'm just warning you guys that sudden stuff could happen coming here that affects the channel a little bit, because I do actually care about her quite a bit. But so far the alarm bells don't need to be rung to 10 out of 10, but I'm a little worried about Reese, guys, just so you know. She's almost 10 years old, perfectly healthy, but I'm just letting you guys know that, like, if I disappeared for a couple days, don't be surprised if there's bad news. But she's not going to go away right now or anytime soon, but it is a bit worrisome. And man, veterinarians are not cheap. So just know whatever you're tipping is definitely going towards paying for some of her medical bills. But right now she's fine. She's not going away in a week or something, but just a heads up that, she is turning 10 soon. She's not young anymore. Oh, she certainly acts like a young dog. Whew, okay. Tech Kev writes in and he says, hit 386 and 486 viewers, 586 Pentium right now on this stream. Any idea when you're going to reach 686 Cyrix levels? I think we're almost there. I'm seeing over almost 680 viewers, which reminds me, can we get some more upvotes, people? We've got like 100 upvotes and we've got almost 700 viewers. So can we please get some upvotes, everybody, to boost this in the algorithm there? And again, just I'll remind you guys of this. This stream is sponsored by Micro Center. I don't know what else to say except that if you can go there, you should. They have the best deals, the best selection, and you can get a free SSD if you click the link in the description. Clicking that link helps me, whether you want something for free or not. Just clicking the link helps, and I assume you want a free SSD, so check that out. But let me move on here. Okay, let us see. I'm gonna save. Let me see here. I'm gonna save one of these questions for later on, the Navi ones. Before I get to RDNA 3, let me finish getting through the Intel and AMD stuff. Brett Summers writes in and he says, "Hello, Tom, and if there are any guests, just me today. What is going on with the delays from Intel? CPUs, GPUs being pushed back. It's nuts. What's causing this? Were the roadmaps too ambitious, like their 10 nanometer node design goals? Or I know you mentioned a lot about Raptor Lake, Meteor Lake, and Air Lake recently, but can we assume these delays will affect Battle Mage as well? It's not like Alchemist has come out on time." So let me put that there. All right. So, ha- look, it, what I would say about Intel's delays is the more they delay more products, the more I don't have the more I like almost refuse to put the, deep color, the high confidence level on the release date portions of any of my Intel leaks. It's like, how can I be sure of any Intel release, even if it comes from multiple Intel sources, if what they say never happens? So that's generally what I would say about Intel's release dates. Now, if you come up to me and you go, "Well, what does that mean for Battle Mage?" Well, you don't want to let speculation turn into more speculation. I don't know. I can't confirm any Battle Mage delay. I can't confirm any Arrow Lake delay. Let's not let this get away from us. All I can say is Meteor Lake was supposed to come out early 2023. Now it's coming out mid to late 2023. Arrow Lake was trying to paper launch in 2023. Frankly, I was always skeptical it would come out at that time. And now it sounds like it's 2024 by their own admission. Does that mean I should assume Lunar Lake's delayed and the other lakes I've heard about? Does that mean I should assume Granite Rapids is delayed? No, I'm not going to assume a specific product is delayed. I'm just going to say until we see one of these things come out when they say it will, I just am skeptical. I don't know if you let's see what is going on with these delays. My suspicion is it's a middle management issue. I think Intel's got good upper management now. They've got plenty of talented engineers. I met a lot of them, some in person, and they're great. I just feel like there's something going on with middle management and trying to do too much at once, right? Like Intel is a big company. They've got a lot of people, but how many people are talented at driving a specific product forward? Probably a lot of them at Intel, but I mean, like, look at the amount of things they're trying to launch. Like, it's not like AMD where it's like, we're going to work on this and then this also, this IP blocks also share. Like the IP block in Raphael is the same one in Dragon Range, literally, I believe. And then also probably very similar to the one in Mendocino and probably going to be used in something else. And you see all of these IP blocks shared and mixed and matched at AMD, and then they specifically target a thing so they don't waste resources. Whereas Intel is trying to put 47 tiles or something together with Ponte Vecchio. And what? Like, try to launch anything first before you try to do something that ambitious. With AMD, we saw this giant CDNA1 chip, and then we saw them split it into 2 dies, and now we're seeing them split it into like 16 dies or whatever it is total. I forgot. Was it one, two, three, four? So yeah, it's like I don't remember, like 8 to 12 or 16 dies depending on how you look at CDNA3. Like, what do you count as a die? But like, and they didn't try to build they didn't try to build Rome in a day. They're just like, pun, I guess that's a pun because of Rome. And they just did what they could. Naples was 4 different chips, and then they went to different types of chiplets, and now they're moving to even more types of chiplets and accelerators and can see it. And then they added Vcache, and after Vcache, they allowed other things. Like AMD's doing it step by step, and that's why it's coming out on time. And it's a similar thing with TSMC. The reason TSMC's node increases have been so successful is they didn't try to like triple density when like Intel going from like 14 to 10 nanometer. They're like 50 to 80% more density. And then if we get like a 10 to 20% density increase on some kind of 7 to 6 nanometer thing, whatever. TSMC just wants achievable, consistent increases as they go. And that's why they, over time, have gotten in the lead because, 1.5 times 1.5 times 1.5 adds up. And if Intel just tries to get to 3x in 1 year and then has to delay it 4 years, all of a sudden they're behind. And so it's all of this. And it's funny talking to some contacts at AMD. Actually, once I was brought into a meeting with some people at AMD after the Bergamo leak where they were like, "Oh my god," like, they just wanted to pick my brain, and they were, like, asking about Intel, and they're like, AMD themselves really expects Intel to, like, become more balanced under Pat, and I think they are, but when I started telling them just a little bit like, "Well, they're still trying incredible things," they had this look like, "That's not good," and I don't know. I still worry that Intel's trying to bite off too many ambitious projects at once, and I think the fact that AMD's done what they knew they could accomplish, like they said at the Investor Day, made the right bets at the right time is why they're successful. And it just still seems like even if Intel's being more reasonable, even if Intel's getting a hold of, not trying to do too many things at once, it still seems like they're trying to do too much than they're willing to admit to themselves that they can do at once. If that's literally just middle management, if it's just it doesn't matter, they're just doing too much, it's not even the managers themselves, I don't know, but it's gotta be one of those things because as I said in my video last night, it's clearly not node problems, Alchemist has made it TSMC. It's clearly not just drivers. That's not the issue with some of these other products. It's clearly not just hardware bugs. There just seems to be something with them being overextended. All these are different issues, and yet we can all just assume there's delays. It's like Intel's like operating like a game developer. It's like the game developer tells you they're not going to delay the game, and then guess what? They always do. Like, why is it so consistent and predictable that Intel delays things? They've got to solve that. And if it means trying to do less crazy things at once, and it probably does mean that, then they should do that. Or hiring more people, although they just said they're slowing down on hires. I don't know, but they've got to get their act together. All right. That's starting to get a little rambly. Let me move on to a reader mail here from a patron about Arrow Lake. And I do see the tipped questions. I'm just gonna try to get through the remaining Intel and AMD questions so we can move on to graphics cards. Um, so don't hesitate. Keep putting in those questions on the live chat. Kenahoon25 writes in and he says, "Hey, Tom, I know the recent news on Intel's delays are very disappointing, but it has made me start thinking, when will Intel still be able to, let me see here, will Intel still be able to compete in the low end to the mid high end? Arrow Lake i9s from your leak say that it should be 8 plus 32. It should be. So possibly that means what? We're seeing an 8 plus 32 i9, 8 plus 24 i7, i5s with 6 plus 16 conceivably. What are your thoughts on i5s and i7s competing with Ryzen 5 and Ryzen 7s in the near future?" Well, I don't know. Honestly, my answer to that is, what do you define as near future? I'd consider next year near future. Do you consider late 2024 at the earliest near? I don't know that I do. It's too soon to say. I've got my expectations for Zen 5, but I'm going to keep them mostly private because frankly, if I say anything, sometimes take it as me saying it's definitely going to happen. I'm not sure yet. It's still a bit out. There's still decisions being made before the design's 100% locked in. We're getting a little close to where Zen 5 is going to start having a lot of stuff locked in, but it's not quite there. And the same pretty much goes for Arrow Lake. So I don't know what to say about an 8 plus 24 i7 over 2 years from now. I don't know. We'll see. What I would say though is if an 8 plus 24 i7 sounds insane, it's because you're comparing it to what we have now. Remember, Zen 4 and Raptor Lake are going to launch, then Zen 4 V Cache and 4 nanometer Phoenix and maybe other products. And then you're going to have Intel launching Meteor Lake. Who know, like for all we know, Arrow Lake won't be an Arrow Lake 8 plus 24, if you will, i7 won't be competing with some 16 core Zen 5. Could be a 32 core, could be a 16 plus 24 core Zen 5. There's a lot of options on the table here for how they can mix and match. And for all we know, if Arrow Lake gets delayed into 2025, could be Zen 6. So it's just too soon to say, but the fact is, if Arrow Lake was coming out late 2023, I would go, I think it's going to be a killer. And it's going to be way better than Meteor Lake. It is. It's takes some of the stuff that was derived from Jim Keller's Royal Core project. So it's going to be a lot better than the previous gen. But when I see 2024 at the soonest, I go, well, AMD is not going to be sitting around. This has been a theme of my channel since its beginning. AMD is not sitting still, right? When I talked about Comet Lake, Rocket Lake, and I was like unimpressed because I know Zen 3 will be out. You know, am I excited about Arrow Lake? Yes, but it's not going to be competing with Zen 4, guys. So it's too early to say if it's going to be some crazy victory or not, because AMD is doing just as many innovative things as Intel, it seems. And they're actually getting them out on time, by the way. Spamtum G Spamtum writes, and he says, if Turin is 256 cores for the full Zen 5 3 nanometer variant, and that's going to be 4 to 6 times more efficient than Emerald Rapids, certainly could be. What is Zen 5C's Turin family versus Emerald Rapids look like? It's just too soon to say, right? I know there's Zen 5 products up to 256 cores right now. Too soon to say what that is versus a Zen 5C or what the final thing will be. So I would just leave it like that. Um, and honestly, it doesn't matter. Like, Emerald Rapids can get blown away by whatever it is, no matter what, based on what I know. So if there's a 384 core, Zen 5C, if it turns out Zen 5C is just the 256 one, Emerald Rapids is behind, guys. All right, let me put a timestamp here as we transition into some more GPU questions. Dragoon Kane writes in from the live chat. Thank you for the tip. He says, hi, Tom. I thought Navi 33 was going to release first, but upon reviewing other sites, they say 3132 will release first and 33 next year. Any new updates? I mean, where are these coming from? This is honestly, these questions annoy me. You're not annoying me, Dragoon. I'm just annoyed by the fact that this is being asked, because it's like, I don't know. Am I supposed to do an update every time someone farts a new wattage for Lovelace on Twitter? 400 watts, 600 watts, 700 watts, 800 watts, 300 watts, 900 watts. What's it at now? What's the new bullshit barometer for wattage on Lovelace now? It changes every week. I'm not going to comment. What? I don't know what they're talking about. I would tell you if I had an update, you would know, because it would get views. But I'm not going to update if I'm not at least mostly sure of something. It's like, come on, guys. And so when it comes to Navi 33, it's like, I mean, what I heard and leaked is 31, then 33, then 32. Has that changed? I'll tell you if I think it has, but for now it's like no comment. No comment. you know, like no comment. I put out the leaks I put out. I'll put out a new one when I'm ready. And I would just say, I guess I'll say this. I know this. I've gotten this update. RDNA 3 is quarter 4. I've seen some people say it'll get delayed. I've seen some people say maybe it'll be pulled up. There's always the hope it'll be pulled up. I've hoped that before myself. RDNA 3 is quarter 4 this year. It is not next year. It is not quarter 3. That's something I'm starting to hear real consistently. Quarter 4. So if they'll manage to get multiple configurations of dies out by them, we'll see. But it's launching this year. Let's leave it at that. And so hopefully that gives you something there, because at least I gave you some concrete update. Let me see. We got an Xbox question. Let me save the Xbox question. Cannot West says, do you think Zen 4 will outperform Raptor Lake in gaming? Today I saw a hardware unbox video where Tim said Zen 4 will only match Alder Lake in single-threaded performance, going by new performance numbers. Yeah, let me address this, because I got an axe to grind here, not with hardware unbox, but with these questions. So Zen 4 advantages. That was something in the title. I was going to wait for a tipped question to ask it. Let me get to it. All right. All evidence seems to suggest that Raptor Lake's probably going to win single threading in Cinebench against Zen 4. I think we can at least pretty confidently say that, right? But in other apps, we'll see. I think Zen 4 is going to excel in some situations in single threading. Raptor Lake will excel in others. In multi-threading, it seems like it's going to be close either way. But then let's talk about gaming. When did Cinebench single threading benchmarks equal all gaming performance? If it did, the 5800 X3D would suck at gaming. And something weird's happened where everyone goes single threading equals gaming performance. That's clearly not true. It depends which single threading app, and it depends on which game. Last time I checked, we're not gaming on single core processors. Multi-threading matters. The consoles have 16 threads and IO controllers for backgrounds for some of the other tasks that PCs don't have. For sure, gaming matters on more than single threading, guys. And what we know is AMD's shown a benchmark boosting all of the cores running Ghostwire Tokyo to 5.5 gigahertz on a pre-qualification sample. I think that's probably good at gaming. Okay? I think it's safe to say that, no? Especially when you consider that 5.5 gigahertz, all cores running the game. Hmm, that's probably 25% higher boosting than all of the cores running on a 5800X 3D. Is that enough to make up for Vcache? Maybe not in some games, but I feel like 20% higher boosting and higher IPC than a 5800X 3D means it's going to game pretty damn well, guys. Single threaded Cinebench scores is not all gaming performance. And I don't know what's happened here. I don't know when all of a sudden everyone started thinking we're gaming on 10 gigahertz single cores. We're not. Core counts matter. Go look up benchmarks. So who's going to win gaming? I know Raptor Lake's probably going to win Cinebench single core. I do not know if it's going to win gaming. And can I make the easy, most obvious statement ever? Zen 4 will win some games. Raptor Lake will win others. That's basically what it comes down to. What I do know though is that games aren't going to have to worry about programming around little cores with Zen 4. All they're going to know is that regardless of how well we utilize this new architecture, the thing's freaking clocked above 5 gigahertz. That's an advantage in a lot of games. A lot of games aren't programmed as well as you'd want, and that's a huge advantage to have that. Some games with the 5800X 3D didn't see a big increase. They will all see a big increase with Zen 4 because clock speeds are the easiest way to scale performance consistently. And that's a big advantage that Zen 4 has that I just don't know where this is coming from that people aren't talking about it. This mixed core clock speed increase means that you're always getting that performance increase. And in games that use the new cache system well, in games that utilize the new architecture well, it's going to be way above that. But at a minimum, if you get Zen 4, you know you're getting that performance increase in everything because it's clock speeds. All right. So that's a big advantage. And then I also want to get to a couple of other things here. I guess I've really already talked about a few things, but I would just say the longevity of AM5 really matters. Like a lot of my friends in my personal life are starting to ask me now, like I have one friend that has a Broadwell E build. It was an engineering sample. And this was 2016. I brought this up a dozen times, but I just can't stop bringing it up because I think he got so lucky. He got a Broadwell E engineering sample 10 core for $240 in 2016. And so he's still using this Broadwell 10 core. And now he wants to upgrade finally. And he's like, should I get Raptor Lake or Zen 4? And I'm like, dude, whether it's single threading, multi-threading, can we just be honest? Raptor Lake and Zen 4 are going to be within 10% of each other at almost everything. So what do you want to do? Do you want the one that's going to use 50% more energy and is on a dead platform? Or does that 5 to 10% matter? Either way, whether Zen 4 wins or loses. My answer is no. Like it doesn't matter. Like get the one that will upgrade to probably Zen 6 and get the one where if you were to get, because what I told him is I would just get the cheapest 8 core right now. It's gonna his Broadwell E 10 core has hyperthreading turned off because of security issues, so it can boost higher. Because remember, the older the Intel generation, the worse they were impacted by those security problems. So he just turns off hyperthreading, has 10 cores running at about 3.1 gigahertz all core. And I'm like, dude, one Zen 4 8 core, it's gonna like triple your performance anyways. So I would just get a Zen 4 8 core and then upgrade to Zen 5, whatever, 24, 32 cores, right? That's the beauty of having a platform that's not dead, right? If you're going to buy Raptor Lake, it's like, is that 6 plus 8 i5 going to be cool? Absolutely. And I think I'm going to end up recommending that Raptor Lake i5 to a lot of people. But at the same time, what's your net upgrade path? You're going to go from 6 plus 8 to 8 plus 16, maybe? All right. Well, so then you're going from what is that then? 14 cores to 24 cores. So at most, you're going to get like 50% more cores. All right. Well, if you have an 8 core Zen 4, I don't know. What are you going to upgrade to? Think about that. Think if you got like an R5 1600 or something on Zen 1, your upgrade path is going from that to over double the cores at higher IPC. So it makes it more sensible to only get exactly what you need now. And an 8-core Zen 4 is probably an overkill for him. And then he just knows he doesn't need to worry about getting the strongest one now or worrying about if it'll ever be worth upgrading to like something slightly better. He knows that there's going to be something wildly better in the future he can get when he wants to go overkill, if he ever wants to. And maybe he never will. So that is such a huge advantage. So I think there are a few advantages Zen 4 has that I just want to recap here that I think people are missing. I just covered this one. AM5's longevity is a very real advantage. Number two, the consistent performance increase. It's not going to be like the 5800X 3D where in some apps you get nothing or even a regression because technically adding all that cache added a little more latency and it had lower core clocks. That you don't need to worry about that with Zen 4. What you know is it's all clocked faster. It's always going to be at least a 15% boost. And there's going to be multi-threading instances where it's like 40% single threading on the higher end SKUs where it's above 20%. But it's always going to be at least that much higher because it's clock speeds and that just always scales. So that's another big advantage. And then the mixed threading is something I just cannot believe more people aren't talking about. Single threading will be close, multi-threading will be close, but what we know is that Raptor Lake's unlikely to clock all cores to 5.5 gigahertz. And there's a decent chance AMD is going to have models that effectively clock all of the cores you're using to 5.5 gigahertz. Now, again, let me be clear about what I mean. Does that mean if you run Cinebench, it's going to run all 16 cores with 32 threads boosting to 5.5 gigahertz for 20 minutes straight? No. But if you're at like 75% usage, which you probably won't be almost ever, if you're playing a game and doing something in the background, so again, over 50% usage. Do I think all of the threads you're using will be boosting super, super high, way higher than Raptor Lake? Yeah, probably because they've already shown it can do that on a pre-qualification sample. And that's unfortunately what Intel used to brag about. That's real world usage. So that's the advantages Zen 4 has that I don't think anyone's talking about. And in addition to something I just need to keep hammering home, because Meteor Lake's delayed, Raptor Lake doesn't need to beat Zen 4. It needs to beat Zen 4 with Vcache as well, because that's all Intel's got on there for a while. But all right. Just wanted to cover that again because it went into a reader mail. Let me scroll back down into some of these things here. All right, let me see. We got an Xbox question. We got a redacted question. We got a tipped question there. See more GPU questions. Let me actually segue into this console question so I don't end up forgetting this guy asked it because we're getting a little too far ahead here. Xbox and PlayStation refreshes. So I'll come back to the Lovelace and RDNA 3 questions. But all right. Giant Pie 12 writes in, thank you for the tip. Have you heard anything about a pro version of the PS5 or Xbox Series X? Yeah, I leaked that it's coming. I think I was one of the first people to leak concrete details a year ago. It was pretty widely covered. I'm aware, yes. He says, it feels like it would be too soon to get out an updated version by 2024 or 2025. Hard disagree. I 2024 would be too soon. You know, recently I was on Sacred Symbols, and I made this point that I think I'd like to say again. I was on a Sacred Symbols Plus recently, so if you want to go listen to that, it's out there. But something Colin asked me about the performance increases we could see. Let me just put things in perspective. And again, teraflops are not directly translating into gaming performance. I don't want to reveal exactly what I've heard about RDNA 3's performance per teraflop because it does seem to be lower per teraflop. And it's not bad. It's just like Ampere's performance in gaming per teraflop is lower than Turing because it packs a lot more FP32. Seems to be the same thing for RDNA 3. This has been widely leaked by now, not even by me, but I can confirm that. So keep in mind the teraflop numbers I'm about to say are not one-to-one. Maybe reduce it by 30% to translate to what we have now. But at the end of the day, let's just average it because the PS5 actually has the same amount of ROPs in the Series X. It has, the bandwidth. I don't want to get into the whole comparison of the consoles, but let's just say they're both around 11 teraflops because I have my issues with how the Xbox actually utilizes theirs and the PS5 actually has more ROPs than it usually would. But anyways, all right, let's just say that. It's around 11, 12, 10, whatever. So think about where we're going this year. I mean, I think Lovelace is going to get to at least 80 teraflops. RDNA 3, at least 70. All right. Then we're going to go to RDNA 4 and Blackwell. I think it's totally conceivable that RDNA 4 could be 120 to 150 teraflops. And that would be in 2023, which I leaked first, by the way, and AMD is now confirming. Then there's going to be an RDNA 5 or RDNA 4 Plus. So, all right. Giant Pie 12. You said you think it will be too soon to get an updated console by 2025. So you think it would be weird when there's 200 teraflop gaming graphics cards in desktop for Sony to go, maybe we want more than 10? You think that's weird. I don't. I disagree with you. I don't think that's weird, guys. I think that's common sense that they're like, hey, there's graphics cards with 20 times the teraflops. Let's launch a stopgap. I think there's a reason they might want to. It's because it will be so much better for relatively less money to add on to it. At a certain point, the cost of the case, the power supply, you're using an old node, it just makes sense. So, no, I think it makes sense for both Sony and Microsoft to launch new consoles. And I've actually heard mixed things because of supply chain issues. So I'm starting to kind of doubt 2023 a little more. But guys, the PS4 Pro came out 3 years after the PS4. This Xbox One X came out 4 years later after the Xbox One. It is common sense that Sony might look around, Microsoft might look around and say there's graphics cards with 20 times the teraflops. Maybe we do an update. I do not think it's too soon. And trust me, when we're there and we're talking about, Lunar Lake leaks, and I have opinion piece videos coming out about if I think Meteor Lake is good enough and what I think about Zen 5, then will it really feel too soon? Again, you're talking about a world where we're debating what we expect out of Lunar Lake versus like Zen 6. And we're already not talking about Zen 4 anymore because it's gotten old. You really sure that's too soon for a new console? Think about it. And they are coming into stock more and more. I just I don't know. Perspective. You can disagree, obviously, but and to be honest, what I think Sony should do is a minor PlayStation 5 Pro update, followed by a PlayStation 6 in 2025. That's kind of what I think they should do, but that also hinges on what new technology will be ready because you don't want to launch a new console until there's like seismic better technology that makes it feel like a new generation anyway. So that's just me, my opinion on that is not even really informed by everything they probably know. All right, let me scroll down here. Let's see. We got Spoonman writes in and he says, any chance a 2-slot small form factor Navi 31 GPU is possible? I mean, yeah, it's possible. I mean, I have no reason to believe that they couldn't make one if they wanted to. The question is if the market cares about that anymore. Because honestly, small form factor has moved on to just, hey, we're just going to make 80% of the capacity in this case be to hold a giant graphics card and build everything around it. So is it possible by AMD? Absolutely it is. Are they going to do it? I just don't think the market's asking for that anymore. And these companies go where the money is. I've long talked about how cool I thought the Fury Nano was. Didn't sell well. In fact, what did I get that for my cousin? When was that? I think in 2016, I got one for like $300, $400 at a Micro Center, sponsor of this video. And then I BIOS flashed it and got the memory to, I think I got the memory to 600 megahertz, so 20% bandwidth overclock. And yeah, that thing performed like a 1074 gigabyte that I got less than a 1070. And honest, because the 1070s were selling for $500 then. It was awesome. The thing only used 200 watts. I think it was awesome. But the market, why did I get it for a cheap price? Because no one wanted it, So I think the market's kind of moved on from small form factor at this point to just mean still bigger graphics card, build a case around it. Let me see here. Apollo writes in, hey, Tom, great show. Thanks. People underestimate how hard it is to design complex, high clocked ASICs like a CPU. And AMD have finally invested, it seems, a lot of engineering power into Zen 4 for that matter. Yes, I agree. I don't see a question there, Apollo, but I agree. Let me see here. Any other questions? Yep, we have one here. Mike writes in. He goes, do you think Zen 4 will support greater than 5200 megahertz upon release? Yes, didn't I leak a number bigger than that too? Where's my let me see here. Open up a slide from one of my old leaks. God, what did I say? I don't remember. I'd have to like find my old. Oh, there it is. This should be it. This should be my like over 1 year old Zen 4 leak. What did I say? Dual channel 5200 megahertz. Right, but that's old. I haven't done a real Zen 4 leak for a while that looks at much more than the core performance. Zen 4 DDR5 speed. Wasn't 5600 megahertz leaked? No? I don't know. Nah, I'm still kind of seeing 5200 megahertz, which is also what I leaked. Um, I mean, I've heard it's a good memory overclocker, so I wouldn't worry about it though. Whatever it supports, you're going to be able to use faster than 5200 for sure. So that's my answer. All right, so that's all the tipped questions, I believe. Make sure I didn't miss any. All right. Let me move on to some other console questions since I'm already on that subject. And then we'll go back to RDNA 3 and Lovelace. How about that? Let's see here. Falto writes and he says, "Did you hear about the new way to purchase next gen consoles through Amazon? It makes it so you can request to be invited to purchase when the new stock drops. I think this should help against scalpers." Absolutely. And I think this should become standard for like most electronics. And it's absolutely ridiculous to me. It's embarrassing how much these companies let scalpers get away with easy stuff. Like, and I don't get that mad at that many scalpers because most of them are just trying to sell one thing and make a few $100 to feed their family. But there were some industrial scalpers, and like these companies could have done like the bare minimum to stop it. So, yeah, I think it will help a lot, and I think it's good timing for when things are supply is going to get better. The Remedy writes in, "Hey Tom, I've been seeing several articles lately about the new Xbox codename Keystone, which is supposedly a self-contained cloud gaming or streaming console that won't run or render games locally. Have you heard any whispers about this?" I guess let me put a timestamp here. Xbox Keystone. Let me just see if my sources, because I did see this. Remember, this question was submitted by a patron ahead of time for free, so you didn't have to tip. And then also, I reached out to some of my sources in preparation for this. Let me see what technically was said here. Let's see here. Okay. Yeah, so at least the feedback I've gotten from my sources so far is that there's not a hard I don't have any hard confirmation of some keystone thing, but it is something I will now be looking into after seeing someone submit this reader mail. So it's good you did. What I would say is that thing better be like almost just the price of a controller because I'm sorry, like if this thing became even $150, I'd be like, spend the extra 150 to get an Xbox Series S that can play games locally. At least I am someone entirely unconvinced by cloud streaming. I like low latency. I can't stand it. The fact of the matter is, when you stream a game, it's at lower quality half the time, anyways, unless you have God internet. If you can afford God internet, you probably can afford a $500 console that can run it locally. And if and it's like the streaming quality, you might as well play it in 720, 1080p on a Series S. So, yeah, I don't know. I think it's something they're likely to try because Microsoft's all about xCloud. That is clearly what they want to focus on, whereas Sony's looking at more like VR local rendering types of ways of expanding their market. They're expanding their revenue, but I can't confirm it yet, and I can't confirm, if it's not something I'm really interested in, to be honest. Um, Swiggles writes in, "What is your take on the low end?" Let me get to this tip question. I'll get to you later, Squiggles. So Patrick Harrison writes in. Let me see here. I don't think I need a timestamp for this. Patrick Harrison writes in, "Do you know which upcoming Xeon, Emerald Rapids, Granite Rapids will feature the new Royal Core architecture?" Well, definitely not Emerald. And I am not sure about Granite. It all depends on if they're like it. Yeah, I guess let me put a timestamp here, actually. Just call it Rapids for now. So when it comes to Intel's upcoming server architectures and releases, I just have to say, I feel like one of these is gonna have to be delayed or reduced in scope or something. Like, I cannot see Intel launching Emerald Rapids in a full way after Sapphire Rapids if it's delayed and really not that much better, you know what I mean? And when it comes to Granite Rapids, I just feel like the more Emerald gets delayed, the more they've gotta focus on just a limited release, kinda like Ice Lake, although now Ice Lake is like a full thing, and then focusing on making sure Granite Rapids comes out on time. Sorry, I'm seeing some weird stream things here. I just wanna make sure it's working okay. Alright, I think we're good now. Hopefully YouTube doesn't screw us, guys. But yeah, so in other words, would I be surprised if they redefine the, Granite Rapids to have a new core architecture than what was initially intended? No, but I just don't know which one, and I keep hearing that Diamond Rapids is going to be a big one, and Granite is going to be much bigger than Emerald, but at this point, I don't know. Like, are they just gonna cancel Emerald, redesign, and accelerate Granite, or are they going to redefine Granite, and that's why they're still gonna release Emerald? You know what I mean? So, I don't know. We'll have to see. Alright. Hopefully, this isn't going to screw us here. All right, let me scroll down a bit. See what other questions we got. Giant Pie 12 writes in, what details have you heard about PSVR 2? Let me put a timestamp for that. 10110 PSVR 2. So, um, PSVR 2. Heads up, I am working on a pretty decent VR leak that's not just going to look at PSVR 2, but is going to look at its competition as well. Or depending on how you look at it, how PSVR 2 will compete with Quest in upcoming indexes and stuff. Because I've actually started to look for getting a few more sources on this, and I've gotten a few, and some of them are really specific. So I don't know what you want me to say about PSVR 2, but all I hear is good things. And it kind of feels like it's all going to come down to execution. Surprise. Again, on this one, I think, because I only hear good things from devs who are using PSVR 2 right now. So if the gaming support is there, if the follow through is there, if they get it out at the right price, it kind of sounds like the competition's waffling around a little. Like they're not sure what to charge, like for an index or a quest, because it's like, do we go for higher quality or do we go for a cheaper price on the follow-up for like a Quest 3? And it sounds like there's a lot of indecisiveness at some of these other companies. So all I can say is PSVR 2 sounds really exciting. And if they want to, they can release it this year. Although it kind of sounds like they might just release it early next year. But I'm excited to see it. The only thing I'm really wondering now is if they have some kind of add-on for wireless, because I think they could do it if they really wanted to. Dissident Agnostic writes in, any idea on if X670 boards will require active chipset cooling? I don't think they're going to. I mean, they use like significantly less energy than the original X570. So let me zoom down a little more. D. Lilo writes in, have you played disc golf yet? No. I know what it is. My brother plays it a lot, though. I see Stefan Payne wrote in here with a question. I'm going to answer this one too because it ties in. PSVR 2, what's the price gonna be? I think no way more than $400, and I think $300 is likely. The fact of the matter is when I look at I know the bomb of the Quest, and when I look at the Quest 2's pricing, I don't see why PSVR 2 would really cost much more than that unless they want some kind of huge markup. All right. Let me move on here. Then back to the patron questions. So let's go back to some let's go back to some Lovelace stuff because I do have that in the title. So while I wait for some more tipped questions, let me put down a timestamp for Lovelace. And remember, hit the like button, guys. Got over 800 people watching. Let's get to over 800 likes, please. All right. Definitely not an Intel engineer writes in. Do you have any idea on how big reference cards will be for the RTX 4080, 4070 length slot width with massive power usage jump? I have an NR200P for it. So I'll let you guys in on a little hint here. Um, I am working on looking at some of the reference coolers for Lovelace, and I'm not going to say more than that, but basically, I think you can expect a 600-watt card to probably have 4 slots, but actually, here's the funny thing. Looking at some, like, stuff behind the scenes, I think if NVIDIA wanted to, they could get away with, like, 3 to 3.5 slots if they wanted to ramp up clock speeds with a 4090 Ti. It just depends. Do they want it to be louder or not? And I already know, I've already leaked. There's AIB 4090s, 4090 Ti designs that are 4.5 slots. So, at a minimum, whether it's reference or not, you're gonna see a lot of 4 slot or higher cards. And I think if they keep it below 500 watts, they can easily keep it 3 slots. And when it comes to the 4080, again, I know people are farting out tons of random power usages every week on Twitter, but at the end of the day, I think if NVIDIA really wants to, I think they can get away with 2.5 slots for a 400-watt card. I actually kinda do. From what I'm seeing, some things and some of the reference designs behind the scenes. The question is what they wanna do, though, right? Will there be 3-slot Lovelace cards? Yes. Are they looking at 4-slot designs? Yes. But I actually am starting to think it's not necessary, but AIBs are going to probably use tons of 3-slot or higher designs. So, I guess to answer your question, definitely not an Intel engineer. Do I have any idea how big the reference cards will be? 4070 for sure 2 slot, 4080 possibly 2 slot. And that's what my answer will be for now. Timothy Gallagher writes in and he says, "Hello, Tom. If I remember correctly, you last said that RDNA 3 would be an 80 to 120% improvement over RDNA 2. Do you have any idea how large of a role drivers will play in the increase? And might those drivers also improve RDNA 2 performance as well?" Let me put a timestamp for that because this is a question I actually have something specific to say. RDNA 3 drivers. So I haven't actually gotten a chance to leak this, or I just haven't yet. I don't know if I've had a chance to, but AMD is doing a lot of optimizations on the drivers right now to minimize latency for their upcoming multi-die GPUs. And it's not a coincidence that what you're seeing in RDNA 2 cards is performance increases. They are doing everything they can to make sure at launch their multi-die RDNA 3 is well utilized. And because of that, there's some stuff they've discovered helps RDNA 2. So yeah, I can say that what they're doing is benefiting RDNA 2 right now, which is really exciting for you guys. But outside of that, I don't really have much else to say. Drivers are playing a role, though. Driver development for RDNA 3 is playing a very real role in these constant performance increases you're seeing in RDNA 2. You're not crazy. It's not a coincidence. Um, and then let me move on here to another question. Let's see. Grudy writes in and he says, "How do you think the lineup release schedule for next gen cards is? How many cards would be released before Christmas this year?" Well, I've kind of already talked about Navi 31 releases, so and probably 33. So I think from AMD you're going to see at least 3 or 4 cards released, but they're going to focus on high end first, and I'm just hoping they release something below $500 this year, but I wouldn't bet on it. They're focusing on the high end first for sure. So for now, just bet on high end RDNA 3, and for Nvidia, um well, I know 8102 is first, as a lot of other people have said, and then there's also 80, 103, and 104 on the way. So I think you're going to see NVIDIA try to launch about half the lineup this year because they want to launch first. You know, they're threatened by AMD, and I think they're going to try to. And that leads into a tipped question here. So Ara Calvara writes in and he says, "Is Lovelace?" Wait, the question jumped around. Let me make sure. There, sorry. R. Calvara writes in, "Is Lovelace actually being delayed to October, November? And have they done some major overhaul? I've seen your 4 nanometer leaks." Um, any decision to move to 4 nanometer um would have been made a long time ago. So I don't think it's like they switched this month or something and that's why it's being delayed. Having said that, I don't know that I'd call Lovelace delayed. Where did I confirm it was coming out in July? No. I believe what I said is that some people think it may come sooner rather than later. But I also always said on Broken Silicon with my co-host Dan, I would expect anything in July and September to be paper launches. And I don't remember if I've leaked this yet, but for months I've been told the real volume's definitely not going to be there until I think August at the soonest or September. So why I'm not going to call anything we're hearing right now a delay. Nvidia hasn't announced it. It's not like the 3090 Ti where they're like expect to hear more this month and then said nothing. They haven't announced anything. They haven't. So this isn't a delay. This is other leakers saying they are wrong. So did something change? I don't know because I was never convinced it was launching in July. All I can ever do is comment on my own information. My own information was that they were considering doing a paper launch sooner rather than later, but at the same time, no volume was really expected until late quarter three at the soonest, anyways. We'll have to see when this is coming out. And you know what? Here's some more food for thought. I've already said in this video, RDNA 3 launches quarter four. Okay. So if you're NVIDIA, you know RDNA 3 isn't launching until quarter four. I'm sure they have just as much information on AMD's release date as me. And then if you're NVIDIA, you look at Alchemist and you're like, it's missing in action. So what's the rush? NVIDIA has all of this Ampere stock they need to sell. Why would NVIDIA rush out Lovelace until it's a month before RDNA 3 comes out? That's kind of where I'm at. Once Lovelace stock starts drying up, launch it. But until then, I wouldn't launch it if I was NVIDIA. And so that's why you got to be careful doubling down on release dates. NVIDIA can just say there's literally no point in us releasing this until, and I think there's basically no point in NVIDIA launching Lovelace until August anyways. So whether it's October or not, I wouldn't launch it until then unless something crazy surprising happens. Crispy writes in, what do you think about the Samsung Xbox streaming TV? Would it be better for them to just embed a Series S hardware into the TV instead? That'd be kind of cool. I don't really know much about this. Let me look. Samsung Xbox streaming TV. So what do we got? Today that it will partner with Samsung create an Xbox app. I mean, I think this is just common sense for Microsoft to put the Xbox app into all smart TVs they can. There's no downsides. You're just expanding the amount of people that can use Xbox, xCloud, pay you. You're expanding the amount of people that can pay you. Do I think they should have embedded a Series S into it instead? I don't know. It's an interesting idea. What you would have to do though is make sure it runs for it to be cost effective. You'd want it to be running all of the apps on the TV, right? Otherwise, you're doubling up on SoCs, and Samsung's probably not the one to do that. More likely, I think you'd see Microsoft team up with someone. I don't know. I don't think Dell makes TVs. Like Vizio or Westing. Like you'd probably be probably not Sony. Although it'd be funny if they did. Sony obviously uses Microsoft servers, and Microsoft uses Blu-ray. So never say never on that one. But when it comes to these kind of streaming console things, I just say make sure if you're embedding the console, it's also running all of the apps in the TV. In fact, if we're being honest, if you were to embed a Series S into a TV, I would say the TV should come with an Xbox Series controller and just use the console. Why do you need smart apps? Just have it boot up an Xbox Series S in the TV, use the apps in the Xbox. Maybe include an Xbox remote with it. That'd be a cool product. But I don't think that's something Samsung's likely to do because they have their own SoCs they want to put in there. They have their own software, their own stuff. But yeah, I mean, if you were going to do that, I think what you would do is just embed the Series S and have it boot up the Series S every time you turn on the TV and just use the apps through the Xbox ecosystem. At least that's what I would do. So, as for anything else, unless you're going to do that, I wouldn't include a Series S, and I think xCloud should just be added to everything. If you're Microsoft, it's just common sense. Okay, let me see. All right, let me try to get through the rest of these Patreon questions. How many of these have I skipped so far? All right, let me see here. Okay, here's a good question. Let's see here. Raphael GPU. The Remedy writes in, "Hey Tom, second question here, but this time related to Zen. AMD is finally adding an integrated GPU to their CPUs now in the form of two RDNA 2 compute units in Raphael, which will be basic for basic troubleshooting, media decoding, running monitors. Do you know if AMD plans to increase compute units or boost the integrated graphics capabilities of future CPUs, Zen 5 and beyond, or they just reserve the better integrated graphics capabilities for their APU lineup? Thanks again, man. Much love." Well, thanks for the question, the Remedy. I mean, I think you already know. I think AMD's already answered this publicly. AMD doesn't even call Raphael an APU. It has only two compute units. My estimation is if you were to overclock it, you might be able to get this to, I don't know, like HD 7730 performance. So what are you looking at? Like half of a Series S or at best, right? Like a bit better than a Switch, which isn't nothing. I mean, certainly that would be strong enough to run some of the simpler games out there. However, that's not what it's for. It's for encoding a few things, running monitors, extending displays. Again, think about it. If you think about the fact that Zen 4 was supposed to launch early 2022, the 6500 XT's issues really wouldn't have been issues, would they? They'd say, why do you need more than two displays from the graphics card? You get four from Raphael and it has encoding. That's what it's for, doing that type of lifting, right? But I don't think it makes sense to make the die much bigger for integrated graphics. I think they're more likely to expand on the things it's supposed to do, more dedicated IP blocks for encoding, streaming, using your SSDs, those types of like controllers and accelerators. I don't think they're going to waste die space on a stronger graphics card. Furthermore, here's something to think about as well. So Zen 4 is going to be like, I don't know, up to 40%, maybe a little better in some extreme scenarios than Zen 3. Okay, well, what kind of bandwidth does DDR5 bring you over DDR4? Uh, 50% to twice as much bandwidth for like 40% or more performance. So if you put a big graphics card in Raphael, how much of that bandwidth from the DDR5 that could be feeding the 16 Zen 4 cores is being leached by that graphics card? That's probably another reason they're just including two compute units because they don't want to take almost any of the bandwidth from the 16 Zen 4 cores. And that's why I don't see them ever going wild with integrated graphics on the top cards, on the top CPUs. I think you just would have Rembrandt in the bottom of the stack if you want a game, and then Phoenix and Strix. There's no reason to do that. If you're buying Raphael, you're buying it for the CPU core performance, and you don't want to waste some of the die space bandwidth on a stronger integrated graphics that no one's buying this for anyways. So yeah, that should answer your question. Um, Giant Pie tips again. He says, what monitor resolution for the mainstream do you think we go to before it becomes just about bragging rights for the higher end users? What kind of monitor resolution for mainstream do we get before bragging rights? I mean, I think 4K 120 is going to start becoming more and more standard in 1440p above 144 hertz. Like 1440p 165 240 hertz is becoming pretty reasonably priced. And I got my 4K 120 hertz monitor. Is it already 2 years ago? I think so. For what did I pay for it? Like 800 bucks. So yeah, it's like I paid $800 2 years ago, and now you're starting to see a similar monitors be like $600, but they have better HDR. So once you get below $600 for 4K 120, it is becoming mainstream. I think it is. And I think that's just, especially with the consoles having some games that push 120 hertz and 4K, having a 4K 120 hertz monitor. So if there's a game you want to play in 4K, if there's a game you want to play high refresh, you have options for both. I think 4K 120 displays, whether TVs, monitors, are just going to start to be, my phone has a 4K 120 display. It's just going to start becoming more and more standard, or at least above 1440p 120. I don't know if it's literally 4K. It's like a weird resolution. So let's see what we got here. Okay, so that's the rest of the tipped questions. Let me see if I have any more patron questions. I believe I had a couple I hadn't gotten to yet. All right, let me put that there. Low end APU. All right. Swiggles writes in, finally getting to your question. What is your take on the low end market going to APUs and the high end market getting so much further in terms of raw power on the CPU and GPU fronts? And how will it affect the gaming experience on PC? Are there too many options so we will only get technical showcases on the consoles now? Right. Let me see. PC wild specs. I don't even know what to call this question in the timestamps, but basically, you're asking, what do we make of this wild increases? I mean, I just talked about 200 teraflop GPUs certainly being possible as a real thing in a few years. Like, what are we going to do when we have integrated GPUs that are like 5 teraflops and high end graphics cards that are 200 teraflops? When we have 40 core Arrow Lake, and then at the bottom, you still got a few people with quad cores still on Steam. Um, I think developers are just going to target what consoles have. And if you can't do that, too bad. Like, basically, the consoles aim for like 1600p 60 hertz right now. And then if you're in 1080p 120 hertz, generally speaking, that seems to be what they target. I always feel like they go a little too low resolution in the 120 hertz mode, but that I digress. I think what you're going to see is developers say, hey, look, if you want to run 4K 60, you're going to need something stronger than the consoles, and you're going to need something like a CPU. You're going to need a GPU stronger than the consoles, and you're going to need a CPU that's like 8 cores above 4 gigahertz, which, remember, is better than what's in the consoles to a certain extent. Once you get streaming into, asset streaming from the SSD, I'll be like, well, do you have an asset streaming accelerator in your CPU? Do you have enough cores to stream in assets while running the game? There will be those types of considerations, but as long as you have something around there, you'll be fine at 60 hertz. And if you want to do 120 hertz, sorry, that's when you need a 5 gigahertz or higher 8 core. The consoles run at like 3.5 gigahertz. If you want to run at 120 hertz, you need something about 5 gigahertz that's 8 cores. And if you don't, well, then I don't know why you're expecting to run at a higher frame rate than the consoles. And then they'll say if you want to run above 120 hertz, you need probably 12 cores above 5 gigahertz. It's just, that's what's going to happen. And we're going to see a lot of scaling, I think, back and forth here. And the fact that we're getting to resolutions that are very comfortable to play in now, like above what you actually need, I think they'll just say, hey, on integrated graphics, you're gaming in 1080p or lower. On PC, you can get 4 times that resolution. On consoles, it's in the middle, and that's it. If you want to game in 8K, yeah, you need something with 200 teraflops, but most people won't. And I think that's basically just where things are going to go. Now, your question about technical showcases on consoles, I actually wrote something down ahead of time for that. So, what's my take on developers often doing tech showcases on consoles? Well, it's because it's easy to show off, right? If you do an Unreal Engine demo on the PlayStation 5 and you go, this was running on a PS5, that's something concrete people can think about right away, right? Because otherwise they're like, this is running on an i7 Alder Lake system with 16 gigs of RAM and a Gen 4 SSD and a 3070. And if you want to, you can run it on a 3080 if you go to this download link, but make sure your RAM is at least 5,000 megahertz, because if it's not, it affects the performance. It takes a while to explain. But if you're running running a showcase on a PS5, you just go, and this is running on a $500 console. Drop mic. It's much easier to make it sound impressive. It's much easier to have people conceptualize what performance level you're talking about. You can just download the app from the PlayStation Store and Microsoft Store for the Series X. That's why you see a lot of showcases on console, because it's easy to get what they've accomplished on a given piece of hardware without explaining 10 different technical specs in a gaming PC. And people think of consoles as weak, even if I think that's bullshit. And so they'll go, oh, wow, they were able to do that on a PlayStation. I wonder what you can do on PC. So there's a lot of reasons you do showcases on consoles. It's easy to convey the piece of hardware. It's easy to sound impressive. And it's easy to do. You don't have to it's a showcase. This isn't a game you're going to sell to people. So you only have to program it for one hardware spec, and it's easy to do that for one demo that you're not going to even sell. Um, let me see. Brett Summers writes in, Tom, we always talk about the latest and greatest CPUs and GPUs. Usually, I want to know though, what's your take on peripheral brands? I guess I'll put a timestamp for this, even though this isn't something I usually talk about. Peripherals. Mouses, keyboards, headsets, microphones, whatever. I use a Logitech G510. Wait, do you? I do too. Right? It's like 15 years old. I also use a Logitech G510. It has a really rudimentary screen on it that you can program apps to. So right now I can see CPU performance and RAM usage on my keyboard. And I know there's fancier keyboards that have come out with like full OLED displays. And I've always just gone, I don't need anything better than that. Let me see my CPU and RAM usage in the time on my keyboard. I don't need anything more than that. I also have a thing that has news stories pop up on it while I'm gaming. Yeah, I love it. But he goes Blue Yeti for microphone, which is Logitech. Oh, I didn't know that. And Logitech G935 for headset. It's a bit of a shilling, but they work well. Yeah, Logitech's typically pretty good, especially lately. They have a lot less cheap stuff than they used to have. Otherwise, I don't know. I have a Shure mic here, and I think their audio quality is actually pretty impressive. Um, and I like a lot of Corsair products, to be honest. I've noticed a consistency. I like a lot of Arctic products. There's a consistency. I've actually met the people at Arctic too before. I've got to get them on a broken silicon or die shrink at some point. I think I should do that. But I've always just found a consistency in their products that I like. Outside of that, it's hard to say. I mean, at the end of the day, guys, I just look at reviews and try to get the best thing no matter what. I don't really give blind advice for any brand, but typically that's what I've had recently. Although it's not because I was actually looking for a Logitech product. This is just the keyboard that actually did what I wanted to for the price. Monroe writes in, with much of the upcoming games delayed to 2023 and beyond, such as Breath of the Wild 2, Stalker 2, Starfield, Suicide Squad, Redfall, and now probably God of War Ragnarok, which games do you think can challenge Elden Ring for Game of the Year? I think Elden Ring's a shoo-in for Game of the Year, guys. Let's be honest on that one. The only thing that could maybe come close is like the new Call of Duty, which the trailer they showed didn't really show me anything to get excited about. That's not to say it was a bad trailer. It was just like, surprise, in Modern Warfare 2, you'll have night vision and use guns. Oh, and there will be helicopters. Yep, that's in every Call of Duty. So I don't have much to say. But I'm guessing that game will at least be decent. So I don't know. I mean, I think Elden Ring's pretty much a shoe in. Yeah, Tiny Tina's not going to challenge it, even though it's a decent game that I've been playing as well. Um, unless there's some surprise PlayStation exclusive, I don't know. But what do you mean God of War Ragnarok delayed? Did they say that or I I don't think where is this that it's being delayed? Oh, and as luck would have it, new report came out saying November. I think God of War is coming out this year. The only games that can challenge Elden Ring then are Horizon and God of War, surprise PlayStation exclusives. Not a surprise. So I don't know what else there is besides that. Maybe Modern Warfare, because I can't think of other third party games coming out. Like, right, because Grand Theft Auto is a couple of years away, I think, or a year or two away. All these other Microsoft games are delayed. Um, I don't think Halo co-op counts as a challenge to Elden Ring. Yeah, so I don't know. I think Elden Ring's got it locked in. Uh, but we'll see. God of War and Horizon will probably get Game of the Year from some websites. All right, Jake Storms writes in, what about the mobile parts going chiplet and maybe having different IO dies with different GPUs and IPs and memory channels supported in such to negate the need for some dedicated mobile GPUs? Well, I mean, there's going to continue to be monolithic APUs forever. It just makes sense when you get down to that die size to make it monolithic. But what do I think about mobile chiplets and going with different IO dies? Dragon Range is technically the start of this. So, and Alder Lake HX is actually the first one to kind of do it. No, so it's happening. You're going to see chiplet APUs for sure moving forward, especially when you look at what they're accomplishing, probably with RDNA 3, even more compact 3D stacked stuff. But I don't think that means they get rid of all APUs either, especially budget APUs. I believe are going to continue to be monolithic. I guess let me put a timestamp on that one. Chiplet APUs. Pushing Polygon says, Tom, do you have any recommendations for CPU, GPU architecture books or learning resources? I do not, but maybe ask Brian Heemskirk on Twitter. He seems to know a lot. Quite a friend of the Moore's Law is Dead channel. Let's see. No one is too big. Okay, so that's the tipped questions, and I believe I've gotten through the Patreon pre-submitted questions. I have. Okay. So let me game of year and Chiplet AM5. We'll just put that timestamp there. So if you're on the Moore's Law's Dead Discord, feel free to ask a question now for free in the after video channel. I'll go for a little bit longer. We've been going for a while now, so I can't promise how much longer I will go. Let me see here. Sorry, I'm just looking at something why I need to double check something for maybe for plans tonight. Let me double check this quick, guys. I'm not going anywhere. Click the like button. Hmm. All right, let me get back to this. DJ Aftershock writes in, he says, performance and architecture targets for the PS5 Pro and Series X Pro. Yeah, I don't know what the Series Z. I think a Zen 3 RDNA 3 combo for the PS5 and something similar to Phoenix. Something similar to Phoenix for Xbox. Well, Phoenix is way weaker than the Series X, so I hope they don't use Phoenix. But let me go to yeah. So well, I've already talked about it, but I guess you gave me a tip, so let me elaborate a little more here. So, um, what performance could we do for the console refreshes? And again, I talked about this in a lot of detail on Sacred Symbols Plus recently, and in fact, I wonder if I can still easily pull open those notes from when I was last on Sacred Symbols because they're all very well organized, and I probably just want to do that. Let me open that up quick for you. This was my fourth appearance on Sacred Symbols. Here we go. So, right. I just want to put things into perspective for what's possible here at the consoles. And this is a spiel I told Colin Moriarty. All right. So, if you think about where we are now and where we're going to go, basically the PS5 and the Series X are like upper mid-range cards basically for the time. The PS5 has something very similar to what an RX 6700 will end up being, I think, or 3060 Ti in performance. Again, not going to argue with you guys about this. I've beaten this horse to death on where those numbers come from. All right. So, in other words, AMD went with mid range CPU, 8 cores of Zen 2, and mid range or upper mid range, lower high end GPU. That's about what you would expect. They did similar things previous generations. So, already, if AMD wanted to, or well, AMD and Sony wanted to launch a PS5 Pro this year, we know they could use a 6 nanometer Zen 3 Plus. Yes, they've only used that in Rembrandt, but there's no reason they can't use that IP block from Rembrandt on a PS5. So there's no reason they couldn't take the PS5, shrink it to 6 nanometer, give it Zen 3 Plus, maybe clock it to 4 GHz instead of like 3.4 or whatever it's at. There you go. Right out of the gate, you've just given this console like a 50% performance increase for its CPU. And then what do? Honestly, I think just give it faster memory. Go from 14 gigabit per second to 20 gigabit per second, which will be standard near the end of this year. 20 gigabit per second GDDR6, you're looking at what is that then? Like almost 50% more bandwidth increase. And what have they really done? Die shrink to 6 nanometer, just used Rembrandt's IP block for the CPU, and updated the GPU's memory to be faster. In fact, if you think about it, AMD could just enable all 40 compute units in the PS5 Pro and then disable 4 of them and use the disabled yields for the PlayStation 5 Slim. Why not? Honestly. And that's kind of what I would recommend not Nvidia, Sony do. I would kind of recommend Sony instead of waiting, launching a 2-3 times stronger console for like $600 in 2 years. Why not just half a year to a year from now, launch a small update, transition the PS5 into 6 nanometer, enable all 40 compute units for the Pro model, give the Pro model faster RAM, and Zen 3 Plus. I mean, you could conceivably bring out a console with the higher clock speeds, all enabled compute units, 50% more bandwidth. Heck, if they went to like 21 gigabit per second or 24 or 27 gigabit per second, that's coming out and it's not going to be as expensive as you guys think. They could conceivably almost double bandwidth without changing anything in the memory controller, besides probably some tweaks to make sure it can support the higher speeds. I'm sure there's a limit there. So they'd probably be limited to like 20 gigabit, but it's totally conceivable. They could launch a $500 console that's 50% stronger or more in under a year. Zen 3 Plus based, literally the same GPU, faster memory, clocked faster, all CUs enabled. Disable it for the PS5 Slim model. That's what I would kind of recommend Sony do because almost all games use dynamic resolution and frame rates now. You could just let it now, instead of being dynamic resolution around 55 hertz or something, it's just now always 4K 60 with that boost. Why not do something like that? I don't know. That's what I would do if I was Sony. But if they wait longer, guys, I mean, look, the path forward for the end of next year or something, they could totally do an RDNA 3 Navi 33 base. Take Navi 33, take the memory controller, make it 256-bit instead of 128-bit, give it less infinity cache or remove the infinity cache, but give it way faster memory again, and give it Zen 3 Plus on 6 nanometer. Boom, done. There you go. Or what else could they do? They could do a 4 nanometer RDNA 3 at the end of next year or the year after that goes to like Zen 4 or Zen 5 4 nanometer version with RDNA 3 4 nanometer, RDNA 3 Plus, something like that. So there's tons of options. They could launch something for $500 this year. If it's too late, they'd have to I've already designed it. They could launch something for $500 this year that's 50% better. They could launch something for like 550 that's like twice as good next year, for 650 that's like over twice as good next year. And if they waited till 2024, they could totally triple performance in like a $600 console. Pretty conceivably, because by then so much better stuff will be out. It's not going to be cheaper though because of inflation, unfortunately, but they can do all of this, you know. So the amount of options they have, it just kind of depends on what node, what price, and which IP they want to combine. Um, Let me see. Jake Storms writes in, yes, I was more suggesting the IO die and GPU IPUs for different SKUs at different GPU performance levels rather than using a dedicated GPU. Okay. I mean, you know, again, Jake Storms, and what was your other question here? Yeah, I mean, going with chiplets. I mean, they can still mix and match IP blocks for monolithic ones as well. But MMCB writes in, some details about AV1 encoder on RDNA 3 and RTX. No, I mean, I don't know what's happened where all of the sudden the number one thing everyone uses their graphics card for is AV1 encoding. And I'm not trying to be a jerk about it. I'm just like, it's not actually something I paid that much attention to. So I would assume they're, hasn't someone else leaked they're going to have it though? But it's honestly not something I paid attention to. All right, let me see here. Let me close that. Oh, and let me check the Moore's Laws at Discord. Mm. Spamtum Neo writes in and he says, hey, Tom, do you think that Pat's reputation in the tech industry could be damaged a ton if Intel doesn't get their crap together? Um, I don't know because it's kind of like, what is his image right now? He's well regarded, but I don't know. Is he regarded as well as Lisa Su? What does he have to lose? If Intel crashes and burns, yes, it would be bad. But you know, how old is Pat Gelsinger, right? Pat Gelsinger. Isn't he 61? So he's going to be at Intel for at least, I bet, the next 4, 5, 6 years. If his reputation was damaged, he's going to retire anyway. So he's the type of guy that seems like he's willing to go down with the ship. He'll be working tooth and nail to make it work out, I'd say. I don't think he's too concerned about that. He's just concerned about making Intel get back to some kind of a leadership status. Let me see here. Make sure I didn't miss any questions. Okay. Probably going to stop within 10 minutes. So if you have a question to ask, whether at the Patreon and the Discord or here in the tipped questions, do it quick. Doesn't Pat have to retire in 4 years per Intel's rules? I don't know. Does Intel have rules about retiring? I did not know that. They do. That's kind of interesting. Hmm. Yeah, interesting. I don't know. If he does, then he does, you know. Do I have any contacts inside the GTA 6 development team? I couldn't say either way, right? What I will say is I've heard whispers about GTA 6 for a while now, although I haven't really heard any recently. So I don't want to say what I've heard and potentially misquote what I thought I remembered. Any final questions, guys? Oh, Spamton Neo says AMD said on their financial analyst day that RDNA 3 will have AV1 support. Oh yeah, duh, they did say that. Someone yeah. AMD confirmed AV1 support in RDNA 3 publicly. Sorry. You're right. I even talked to someone about that yesterday. Sorry guys, I'm really tired. It's been a long week. And also someone's at least saying in the Discord that Intel does have a retirement rules, but that the CEO is exempt. So I guess there you go again. No, Pat doesn't need to retire. So I talked about Zen 4's advantages. I talked about Raptor Lake. I talked about Lovelace performance, RDNA 3 efficiency. Okay, I've covered what I needed to. Any final questions, people? When will a game push consoles to the limit? I don't know. The next Naughty Dog game probably will. Let's see what happens over the next 12 months. I think we're gonna see games that really do some crazy stuff soon already. Thomas Lear writes in, can I slot an RDNA 3 or 40 series GPU on my AM4 motherboard once it is released? Uh, yeah, of course. I mean, there's no reason you can't. Yes, RDNA 3 will work with AM4. You heard it here first, people. So will the 40 series. And I don't think you need to worry about it holding it back, really. As long as you have PCIe 4.0, I wouldn't worry. And, I mean, most people don't need a crazy CPU to game at the resolutions and frame rates they're actually gaming at. You'll be fine. RDNA 3, write that down with the timestamp. All right. Any final questions? Vcache APU? You'd assume so eventually, guys. Do we get a dog tax before we leave? Well, I did say Reesie might be going through some medical problems. Well, she is actually. I had a pretty huge bill today. So remember, anything you send me is supporting Reesie right now. But I'll bring Reesie up before we go. Reesie, puppy, here, Reesie. I think she's coming. Ian Henriksen writes in, anything about how AMD is doing with their user-facing software? NVIDIA and Intel are still so dominant with stuff like CUDA, TBB, and MKL. All I have to say about AMD software is the same stuff I've kept saying. They're working on it, and it keeps getting better, and it's going to be a big push in the professional market with RDNA 3 compared to RDNA 2. Here, Reesie. Up, up. There she is. Yeah. She had to get surgery this week. Fingers crossed she has good test results come back too. So okay. Okay. Go. Sit. Here she is. All right, let me see if there's any other final questions. Wasn't there another one I missed? No, that's it for now. All right, well, I covered. Why is that bleeping? Oh, I see. That's why it's freaking out. So yeah, I covered Zen 4's advantages. I covered Raptor Lake. I covered RDNA 3 and Lovelace. And otherwise, I guess the only thing I will close on is watch my last video, guys, if you got this far. I think my last video really finally made the points I was trying to make about why I'm concerned about Intel very well. And I just, this week, let me put it this way. I understand gamers are for some reason arguing. If you were to ask gamers, you would think the only reason someone builds a PC is for single threaded Cinebench. Apparently, that's all we use our CPUs for now. But the fact of the matter is, winning, losing 5% at a couple things when overall it's equal, that's not the concern. The concern is that I keep hearing about Raptor Lake having a squishy release date. It's execution, it's the platform support, it's the overall lineup. That is what makes you win. And they're going to be close. And that's what makes me concerned about Intel. Because it only sounds like it's getting worse after this year. And behind the scenes, if you talk to financial analysts, they are not happy with what they're hearing out of Intel. When AMD announces all of these products they actually trust will get out on time, and then they look at Intel, and Intel just goes, "Dog ate my homework. Sorry, everything's delayed." Speaking of dogs down here. So I guess that's just kind of something I will close on. Otherwise, I'll just say thanks for watching. Again, remember this episode was sponsored by Micro Center. Look at the links in the description. Click on those links. It really helps the channel. You can get a free 256 gigabyte SSD. Tell them Moore's Law is Dead sent you. This really does help us so much. Continue to get sponsored. Can't do this without our sponsors. And subscribe to the Patreon, guys. I'm about to put out reader mail requests for Wendell. So Wendell from Level 1 Text is coming on tonight. I'm going to put out the reader mails. We're going to be talking about Intel and AMD's future. If you want to ask me and Wendell questions, that's where you'll do it. There's tons of there's tons of ad-free and early and premium content coming out every week for patrons. I can't do this without the patrons. So, there's a ton of stuff there for you if you go there. And otherwise, I'm tired. It's been a very long week. I ate dinner at 12:30 a.m. last night after getting that video out. I need to take a break before the podcast recording later this weekend. Thanks for watching, everybody. Hit the like button and have a good weekend.